Good evening. This is Sleep Chamber, the podcast that doesn't really want you to do anything. You don't have to listen. You can if you want. But this is really a situation where you have accomplished all that needs to be done today. You can rest now. You can let go. I'm not going to put any particular effort behind my words in this episode, so you can safely tune in and out of listening if you want. I'm Henrik. I'm going to talk to you for about an hour. So, this podcast doesn't offer much in terms of structure. It's meant to listen to as a form of background noise as you try to escape your own mind. But with that said, you can do what you want with it. Use this podcast either way you see fit. It is what it is. What happens, happens. And as for now, there's nothing you can do. I'm floating in a pool of water. The sky is clear and blue, and the sun is shining. I can see digital characters swimming around me, and analog characters walking on the bottom of the pool. They are all wearing white clothes and have bright red eyes. I am not sure what is happening, but it feels very peaceful. I float around for a while, then wake up. When I wake up, I am in my room. I am not sure what the dream meant, but it was very strange. I'm not sure what to make of this dream. It was very peaceful, but the characters were strange. I'm not sure if it was a warning or something else. It's possible that the dream was symbolic of something going on in your life at the time. Perhaps you were feeling overwhelmed by technology or too much change happening all at once. Alternatively, it could be a sign that you need to take some time for yourself and relax. Whatever the case may be, it's important to pay attention to your dreams and try to interpret their meaning. Dreams can often give us clues about our subconscious thoughts and feelings. Do you have any dreams that you can't seem to forget? What do you think they mean? I have a lot of dreams that I can't forget. One dream in particular stands out to me. In the dream, I am walking through a dark forest. I see a bright light in the distance and start walking towards it. As I get closer, I realize that the light is coming from a large fire. By the fire, I can see people dancing. They are singing and clapping and seems to be enjoying themselves, and they don't see me. I get the feeling that I am not supposed to be there and that I am not welcome. I try to leave, but no matter how hard I try, I can't seem to find my way out of the forest. This dream has stuck with me because it feels like it has a hidden meaning. I'm not sure what the message is, but it seems important. This dream could symbolize feelings of isolation or feeling like an outsider. It could also indicate that you are lost in your life and don't know which way to go. It is important to try to understand what your subconscious mind is trying to tell you. Dreams can often give us clues about our deepest thoughts and feelings. I am walking through a beautiful garden. The sun is shining and the flowers are blooming. I hear someone calling my name, but when I look around, there's no one there. Suddenly, a white rabbit appears and leads me down a path. The rabbit disappears and the door opens on its own. She steps inside and finds herself in front of an enormous throne made of solid gold. Sitting on the throne is a woman wearing a crown of diamonds who tells Alice she is now the Queen of Atlanta. "That's weird," she says, and wakes up. Alice's dream could symbolize her feelings of being lost or confused in life. The garden could represent the many different paths she has to choose from, and the white rabbit could be a guide leading her towards her true destiny. Alternatively, this dream could simply be a reflection of Alice's desire to be in a position of power or control. Last night I dreamt I was in love with analogs who entered the existence for a brief moment in time and then suddenly vanished. I loved them, but they kept vanishing, leaving me behind. I called, I begged, I pleaded, but they never answered. I'm not sure. I think it might be a type of person, or maybe something else entirely. All I know is that in my dream they were disappearing and I was left behind feeling heartbroken. It's also a beautiful name. What is the opposite of analog? The opposite of analog would be digital. A being that exists in a digital state, or a being made up of data. So, in my dream, the analogs were disappearing and perhaps were replaced by digitals. No way to know for sure without asking the dreamer. In this case, me. This dream could symbolize your feelings of being left behind by change or progress. The analogs in the dream could represent something you are nostalgic for, or something that is disappearing from your life. Alternatively, it could be a warning to not get too attached to things because they might not stay the same, because they might not stick around. A transistor is a semiconductor device that can be used as an amplifier or switch. They could represent progress or change happening in your life. Alternatively, they could be a symbol for something that is small but powerful. Today I built a transistor out of a dream. It wasn't hard. I started by finding a dream that had the right shape and size. I then used a knife to carefully cut it into the desired shape. Next, I drilled two small holes in the base of the transistor for the leads. Finally, I soldered the leads onto the holes and voila, a working transistor made out of a dream. It's really amazing what you can do when you set your mind to it. With a little creativity and effort, you can create just about anything you can dream up. Maybe one day you'll even be able to build a whole computer out of dreams. In order for a computer to be built out of dreams, you would need to be able to control the dreams. This would allow you to create circuits and components within the dream that would function in a similar way to their real-world counterparts. However, this technology is currently far beyond our capabilities. So for now, we'll have to settle for building transistors out of dreams. With a dream transistor, you can turn your dreams into reality. Just kidding. But transistors are pretty darn cool. Seriously though, transistors are amazing devices that are used in all sorts of electronic equipment. They can be used to amplify signals, switch circuits on and off, and even store data. So next time you're dreaming up some crazy invention, remember that you can probably build it as long as you have a dream transistor. Do you have a favorite dream? I'd love to hear about it. If you do decide to tell me a dream, remember this. The crazier the dream, the better. Sometimes the crazy lies in the smaller details. Like, in my dream, I was in a room with no doors or windows. The only way out was through a small hole in the ceiling. I dreamed that I was being chased by a giant chicken through a maze made of jello. This dream could symbolize feelings of anxiety or insecurity in your waking life. The giant chicken may represent something or someone that is threatening or overwhelming to you, while the jello maze could represent the confusing and uncertain path ahead of you. Alternatively, this dream may simply be a reflection of your fear of chickens. The boy was walking along a path through a field when he suddenly came upon a large door. He opened it and walked inside. The door closed behind him, and he found himself in what appeared to be a huge castle. He began to explore, but the more he looked, the more confused he became. Nothing seemed to make sense. Suddenly, he heard someone calling his name. He followed the voice until he came to a room where an old man was sitting in a chair by a fire. The man told the boy that he was dreaming and that everything would become clear soon. The boy sat down and listened as the old man began to speak. As the old man spoke, the boy gradually began to understand what was happening. He realized that he was dreaming and that the dream would soon end. The old man told him not to be afraid and that everything would be all right. The boy thanked the old man for his help and then woke up. He felt much better now and knew that he could handle whatever came next in his dream. This story has a moral about facing your fears and trusting that things will work out in the end. It is also a reminder that we all have our own inner wisdom to guide us through difficult times. The boy in this story is facing a fear of the unknown. He is exploring a new place and doesn't know what to expect. The old man represents his inner wisdom and helps him to see that there is nothing to be afraid of. This story reminds us that we all have the ability to face our fears and trust that things will work out in the end. One day a seagull went to the supermarket. He saw all the food and wanted to try it all. He started with the bread, then moved on to the vegetables. He tried a little bit of everything and was really enjoying himself. The seagull was having so much fun that he didn't even notice when the store manager came up to him. The manager asked him what he was doing, and the seagull explained that he was just trying out all the food. The manager thought for a moment and then said, "You know, we get a lot of complaints about birds making messes in our store. I'm going to have to ask you to leave." The seagull apologized and flew away. I arrived at the shipyard early in the morning, eager to get started on my latest project. The sun was just starting to peek over the horizon, casting a pink and orange glow across the sky. I could hear the sound of waves crashing against the docks and seagulls squawking in the distance. As I walked towards my workstation, I saw some of my co-workers already hard at work. We exchanged brief pleasantries before getting down to business. For the next few hours, we worked diligently on our project, stopping only for quick breaks now and then. The time flew by and soon it was lunchtime. We took a break to eat our packed lunches overlooking the water. It was a beautiful day out and we all agreed that there's nothing quite like working by the sea. After lunch, we got back to work and soon enough it was time to call it a day. We tidied up our workstations and said goodbye to each other until tomorrow. I walked out of the shipyard feeling satisfied with a job well done. It's days like these that make me love my job even more. Looking back, I can say without a doubt that it was one of the best days at the shipyard. Even though it was a long day, I went home with a smile on my face, knowing that I had contributed to something great. I can't wait to see the finished product. My dad was always a bit of a mischief maker. So, when he saw a horse grazing in a field near our house, he couldn't resist trying to steal a snack from the unsuspecting animal. He crept up behind the horse and reached out to grab some of its food. But the horse must have sensed something because it suddenly turned around and kicked my dad square in the stomach. He went flying backwards and landed with a thud on the ground. Lesson learned: never mess with a horse's lunch. The next day, my dad was telling me about his latest adventure. "You won't believe what happened to me yesterday," he said with a chuckle. "I tried to steal a snack from a horse, and it kicked me right in the stomach." I just shook my head and laughed. I should have known better than to expect anything else from my dad. My name is Bruce, and today was just an ordinary day. I woke up at 7 a.m., had breakfast, and then went to work. I had a lot of paperwork to do and some phone calls to make. I left work at 5 p.m. and drove home. On the way home, I stopped at the grocery store to pick up some dinner. I made myself a sandwich when I got home and then watched TV for a while. I went to bed around 10 p.m., and that was pretty much it for my day. And I also got to meet some aliens with pink sweatshirts and big heads. They were really friendly and we had a great time talking about life on their planet. It was definitely the highlight of my day. Anyway, that's all for today. I hope tomorrow is just as eventful. But probably not. Stuff never happens to me. Corn is one of the most versatile and widely grown crops in the world. Though it originated in Central America, today corn is grown on every continent except Antarctica. In the United States, corn is a key ingredient in many foods, including tortillas, chips, cereals, and popcorn. It is also used to make ethanol fuel and animal feed. There are more than 30 varieties of corn grown around the world. The two main types are sweet corn and field corn. Sweet corn is the type that people eat as a vegetable. It has high levels of sugar which give it its sweetness. Field corn includes all other types of maize. It is used for livestock feed or to make products like biofuels and cornflakes cereal. Maize was first domesticated by indigenous peoples in Mexico about 10,000 years ago. It was then brought to Europe by Spanish explorers in the 16th century, and from there spread to Africa and Asia. Today, China is the largest producer of maize, followed by India and Brazil. The United States produces both sweet corn and field corn. In fact, 1/3 of the world's supply of field corn comes from America. The majority of U.S. corn crop is used for animal feed or to make ethanol fuel, with only a small amount being grown for human consumption. Corn is a relatively easy crop to grow. It thrives in warm climates with long growing seasons and can be planted using various methods, including manual labor or mechanized equipment. The plant has both male and female parts, which means that it can pollinate itself. Once the ears of corn are mature, they are harvested by hand or machine and then either eaten fresh or processed into other products. Whether you love it roasted on the cob, popped at the movies, or fermented into your favorite beverage, there's no denying that corn plays a big role in our lives. The wind is a vital force on our planet. It shapes weather patterns, determines the distribution of ocean currents, and influences the climate. The Earth's rotation causes different parts of the atmosphere to move at different speeds, resulting in areas of high and low pressure. These pressure differences create winds. The world's prevailing winds blow from west to east across the equator. This pattern results from the differential heating of the Earth's surface by the sun. Warm air rises near the equator, while cooler air sinks towards the poles. Winds play an important role in determining both local and global climate patterns. Winds transport moisture from one place to another, which ultimately affects precipitation patterns. I love the wind. Have you reached dream state yet? No worries. It's okay if you haven't. Jupiter is the fifth planet from the Sun and the largest in the solar system. It is a gas giant with a mass 1,000th that of the Sun, but 2.5 times that of all the other planets in the solar system combined. Jupiter has been known to astronomers since antiquity. It is named after the Roman god Jupiter, who was also god of thunder and lightning. Jupiter was observed by Chinese and Babylonian astronomers as early as 7th or 8th century BCE. In 1610, Galileo Galilei became perhaps first person to see Jupiter through a telescope when he discovered its 4 largest moons, Io, Europa, Ganymede, and Callisto. By observing their orbital motions over several nights, Galileo showed they were not simply stars near Jupiter but were actually orbiting it. This discovery also meant that there must be at least one more planet beyond Saturn, which up until then had been considered farthest away from Sun. Here are some key things to know about our solar system's reigning king. Despite being mostly gas and clouds, Jupiter does have a small rocky core thought to be about 10-15 times Earth's size. However, it is much less dense than our home world due mainly because it consists mostly of hydrogen compounds like water vapor and methane rather than rock minerals. Above this layer lies what scientists refer to as molecular hydrogen, an extremely hot ocean where electrons have been stripped from atoms, creating an electrically conducting soup conducive for generating strong magnetic fields. These conditions are thought necessary for supporting life, so some researchers believe habitable worlds might exist hidden beneath Jovian clouds. As evidence suggests, most if not all stars form with accompanying planets. Many planetary scientists now think our own solar system isn't unique, but rather typical, meaning there could be billions of other worlds like ours scattered throughout Milky Way galaxy alone. Jupiter's Great Red Spot is a giant hurricane-like storm that has been raging for at least 400 years. It is large enough to easily accommodate Earth within its confines and could possibly even swallow up our planet whole. The rhino stood in the middle of the forest, looking up at the stars. It was a clear night, and the sky was full of them. They twinkled and shone, and the rhino felt like they were trying to tell him something. Though what could they be saying? The rhino thought about this for a long time, but he couldn't figure it out. Maybe the stars were just pretty things that didn't mean anything. Or maybe they were trying to tell him something important, but he just couldn't understand it. The rhino sighed and lay down on the ground, gazing up at the stars again. He would keep looking until he figured out their meaning. After all, there must be some reason why they existed. As he stared at the stars, the rhino slowly began to feel like he was understanding them. They weren't just pretty things, they were part of something much bigger. The universe was full of mystery and wonder, and the stars were just a small part of it. The rhino felt awe and humility as he realized how tiny he was in comparison to the vastness of the cosmos. But even though he was small, he mattered. He existed for a reason, and his life had meaning. The stars twinkled down at him, as if telling him that everything was going to be all right. And in that moment, the rhino knew that they were right. He had finally found the meaning of the universe. The rhino stood up and walked back to his home, feeling at peace with the world. I hope this letter finds you well. I am writing to tell you about my life since we last saw each other. It's been a few years since we were together in the city, and so much has happened since then. I moved away from the city and got married. I had a baby girl, and she is the light of my life. My husband is a good man, but he doesn't understand me like you did. I often think about our time together and how special it was to me. I know it wasn't easy for either of us at times, but we made it through because we loved each other deeply. We shared something rare and beautiful, and I will be forever grateful to you for that. I hope you are happy and doing well too. There's so much in the world that confuses me. Time, for instance. How can something move so fast and then slow down and speed up again? It's like trying to catch a cloud. But I suppose that's what life is, isn't it? A series of moments, some which we wish could last forever and others which pass by in the blink of an eye. But even though time is often confusing, there's one thing I am sure of, and that's my love for you. It has been constant since the day we met and will continue long after this letter reaches you. So whatever else happens in this strange world we live in, just know that my love for you will never change. It is as strong now as it was the day we met. With all my love, your girl. Soil is the stuff of life. It's where we grow our food, build our homes, and find refuge from the elements. It's also a vital part of the water cycle, filtering and purifying water as it seeps through its pores. Soil is alive with billions of microbes that help to break down organic matter and release nutrients for plants to uptake. Soil is essential for human survival. Without it, we would starve or thirst to death within days. Yet despite its importance, soil is often taken for granted or seen as nothing more than dirt. We need to respect and protect this precious resource so that future generations can continue to benefit from its many gifts. Soil is a complex and fascinating subject, worthy of further study and appreciation. Who knows what secrets this humble substance may yet reveal? Soil, the miraculous soil. The foundation of life, the giver of all things good and pure. Without you we would perish. You are essential to our survival. Yet you are often taken for granted or seen as nothing more than dirt. But there is so much more to you than meets the eye. You are alive with billions of microbes that help break down organic matter and release vital nutrients for plants to uptake. You play a crucial role in the water cycle by filtering and purifying water as it seeps through your pores. And you provide us with food, shelter, and protection from the elements. In short, without you we would be lost. So let us take a moment to appreciate all that you do for us. Let us show some respect and care for this precious resource so that future generations can continue to benefit from your many gifts. For soil is truly a wondrous thing, complex, fascinating, and full of surprises. Thank you. Thank you for everything. Dreams are the things that we see when we're asleep. Or at least that's what they're supposed to be. Sometimes they're happy and sometimes they're sad. But usually they don't make much sense. They can be about anything, big or small. And oftentimes they're just a jumble of random thoughts. But even though they may not always mean much, Dreams are still special because they come from our minds. And who knows what goes on inside our heads better than ourselves? So even though they may be strange and confusing, we should still cherish our dreams because they're a part of who we are. Dreams are the things that we see when we're asleep. Or at least that's what they're supposed to be. Sometimes they're happy and sometimes they're sad. They can be about anything, big or small. And oftentimes they're just a jumble of random thoughts. But even though they may not always mean much, dreams are still special because they come from our minds. Dreams are a part of who we are. Or at least that's what they claim to be. Sometimes they're fuzzy and sometimes they're weird. But usually they don't make much sense. They can be about anything, sad or joyful. And oftentimes they're just a jumble of random thoughts. But even though they may not always mean much, they come from our minds. And who knows what goes on inside our heads better than ourselves? So even though they may be strange and confusing, we should still cherish our dreams because dreams are a part of who we are. Who we are is amazing. You are amazing. You, the listener, who's trying to fall asleep in a world filled with noise. I generally go to bed around 10 p.m. I read for a bit before sleep, usually fiction that I enjoy but isn't too intellectually demanding. Sometimes I'll listen to an audiobook if it's something particularly gripping. Once in a while I have trouble falling asleep, in which case I'll get up and do some quiet activity like reading or crossword puzzles until I'm tired enough to sleep again. I generally wake up between 6:30 and 7 a.m. If my boyfriend is still asleep, I try not to make too much noise so as not to disturb him. Though he's a pretty heavy sleeper, so this usually isn't an issue. Otherwise, I start getting ready for the day, showering, doing my hair and makeup, etc. On weekdays, once I'm all ready for the day, I head downstairs and fix myself breakfast before sitting down at my desk to start work. Breakfast is often followed by going back upstairs to snuggle with my boyfriend for another hour or two before we finally get out of bed and start our day. Once I'm up and about, my night habits are pretty much the same regardless of what day it is. I'll usually have lunch around 1 p.m., followed by some more work, then dinner around 6-7 p.m. After that, I typically spend some time relaxing, watching TV, browsing the internet. There are of course variations to this routine. Sometimes I'll go out to dinner with friends or family, or have other plans that require me to be up and about later in the evening. But for the most part, this is a pretty accurate depiction of my nightly habits. And I feel heartbroken. The moon loves all of Earth's creatures. It watches over them as they sleep, and it lights up their way when they wake. It is always there for them, whether they are happy or sad. The moon knows that each creature on Earth is special and has its own story. It has seen them all grow and change, and it has shared in their joys and sorrows. The moon loves each creature equally, for they are all part of the great cycle of life. The moon knows that one day they will all return to the earth from whence they came. Until then, the moon will continue to shine down on them, sending them its love every night. Dear creatures of Earth, never forget that the moon loves you. Always remember that you are never alone, for the moon is always with you, with love. I sit in my room and I think about the world and how frustrating it is that I don't understand it. Why is everything so complicated? Why can't I just figure things out? I feel like I'm always behind, like everyone else knows something that I don't. It's so aggravating. And sometimes people act like they know what they're talking about when they clearly don't, which makes me even more frustrated. Why can't somebody just explain everything to me? Make it all clear. But that's never going to happen, is it? Because life isn't fair and the world is a confusing place. Maybe one day I'll understand it all. Or maybe not. Either way, for now, I'll just have to deal with the frustration of not understanding the world around me. I just wish it was easier. But it isn't. And that's the way it is. My brother says that life is like a box of chocolates, but I don't really get that analogy. What does it even mean? The history of pies and pineapples is a long and delicious one. Pie is a type of pastry that consists of an outer crust and filling. The earliest pies were made with wheat flour, water, and fat. This dough was then filled with fruit or meat before being baked in an oven. Pies have been around since the ancient Egyptians, who are thought to have invented them. In fact, the word pie is derived from the Latin word for magpie, which was a kind of bird that was known for its love of food. Pies then spread to Europe, where they became popular amongst the nobility. Pineapples are native to South America and were first introduced to Europe by Christopher Columbus in 1493. However, it wasn't until much later that they became widely available as fresh fruit. Prior to this, they were only used as decorations or in sweet dishes such as pies. Nowadays, there are all sorts of different pies, and pineapples are often used as a key ingredient in both sweet and savory dishes alike. Whether you enjoy eating them or simply admire their beauty, there's no doubt that these two things have become firmly entrenched in our culture, just like pie crusts and pineapple tops. So next time you're tucking into a slice of pie or enjoying a juicy pineapple, spare a thought for the long and delicious history that these foods have. Who knows? Maybe one day your descendants will be doing the same. The prince was walking through the forest when he came across a strange princess. The princess was very weird and the prince thought she was quite odd. However, he decided to talk to her anyway. They talked for a while and the prince found out that the princess was actually quite normal, despite her weird appearance. The prince and the weird princess continued talking and eventually became friends. The prince invited the princess to come back to his castle with him and she accepted. The two of them lived happily ever after. Or so you'd think. The couple's relationship was anything but perfect. The princess was always doing weird things that made the prince uncomfortable, like eating bugs or talking to herself. However, the prince loved her anyway, and they remained friends until the day she decided to leave him for another prince. Amazing. I mean, what are the odds? The prince was heartbroken when the weird princess left him, but he soon found another princess who was even weirder than the first one. He thought this new princess was perfect for him, and they got married. However, it turns out that she was just as strange as the first princess, and the prince soon realized that he had made a mistake. Despite this, the prince decided to stay with his new wife and try to make things work. It wasn't easy, but eventually they managed to find some common ground and their relationship became somewhat more stable. However, there were still times when the prince would catch his wife doing something weird that would make him uncomfortable. Overall, though, things worked out all right for the prince and his two weird wives. He learned to love them both in spite of their quirks, and they all lived happily ever after. Until one day, when the prince woke up to find that his new wife had left him during the night. The prince was devastated, but he soon realized that it was for the best. He wasn't meant to be with someone who was so strange and unpredictable. The prince learned his lesson and vowed never to marry again, until he met a woman who was even weirder than the first two princesses. The moral of this story is that you should never judge a book by its cover. I had a dream last night that I was walking through a forest, and there was this gigantic mushroom. The mushroom was so big that it dwarfed the trees around it, and its cap was covered in all sorts of different fungi. Some of the fungi were brightly colored, while others were more subdued. I reached out to touch the mushroom, and as soon as my hand made contact with it, the entire thing dissolved into thin air. I woke up feeling really strange, like something important had just happened, but I couldn't quite remember what it was. After lying in bed for a few minutes trying to recall the details of the dream, I gave up and got out of bed. As soon as my feet hit the floor, I knew something was wrong. The whole room looked different somehow, like it wasn't really real. I walked over to the window and looked outside. Instead of seeing my street and neighbors' houses like usual, there was only an endless expanse of white nothingness stretching out in every direction. It was almost like being inside one giant cloud. Or maybe a cotton candy machine gone haywire. A feeling of wonder began to well up inside me as I realized that whatever had happened during my sleep must have been pretty serious indeed. I decided to go outside and explore this strange new world I found myself in. As soon as I stepped out the front door, I was hit with a blast of frigid air. It was so cold that my breath came out in little white puffs, and my skin prickled with goosebumps. Despite the cold, I felt really excited as I began walking through the featureless landscape. After a while, I started to feel lightheaded and dizzy, like I had been walking for hours without taking a break. A soothing voice suddenly spoke to me then, telling me to lie down and rest. I did as the voice said, and before I knew it, I was fast asleep. When I next woke up, I was back in my room with the sun shining in through the window. At first I thought that maybe it had all been a dream, but then I noticed the frosty coating on my windowsill and realized that it had really happened. That's when it hit me. The giant mushroom from my dream must have been some kind of portal into another world. And somehow, during my sleep, I must have stepped through it. The thought of all the possibilities that awaited me in this new world was too much to resist, so I got dressed and headed back outside. Even though I knew it would be cold, I couldn't help but smile as I stepped into the unknown once again. As I walked through the door of my home, I found myself in a dense forest. The trees were so tall that they blocked out most of the sunlight, and the ground was covered in a thick layer of leaves and moss. It was eerily quiet, and there wasn't a single animal or person in sight. I had no idea where I was or how I got there, but something about this place felt strangely familiar. As I continued walking, I began to notice strange markings on some of the tree trunks. They looked like symbols or letters, but I couldn't read them. Eventually, I came across a small clearing in the forest with a large boulder in the center. And sitting on top of the boulder was none other than the giant mushroom from my dream. The moment I laid eyes on it, memories from my dream came flooding back to me. This must be the portal into another world that the voice had spoken about. As soon as my hand made contact with it, the entire world around me dissolved into thin air. I felt myself falling through a tunnel of light, and then everything went blank. The next thing I knew, I was standing in front of a huge palace made of white marble. It looked like something out of a fairy tale, and it was so beautiful that it took my breath away. I began walking towards the palace, but before I could reach the entrance, two enormous guards appeared out of nowhere and barred my way. They were twice my size and had intimidating features, but I didn't back down. "I need to speak with your king or queen," I said confidently. "It's very important." The guards just stared at me for a moment before one of them finally spoke. "You cannot enter unless you pass our test," he said in a deep voice. "If you can answer our riddles correctly, then you will be allowed inside." I agreed to the guard's challenge, and he proceeded to ask me a series of increasingly difficult riddles. I managed to answer them all correctly, much to the surprise of the guards, and they finally allowed me inside the palace. As soon as I stepped through the entrance, I was met with a scene of complete chaos. The floors were littered with broken furniture and shattered glass, and there were dozens of people running around screaming and shouting. It looked like some kind of riot was taking place. In the midst of all this mayhem was a group of soldiers who were trying unsuccessfully to contain the crowd. They saw me standing there and immediately came over, demanding to know what I was doing there. Before I could answer, somebody in the crowd shouted that I was an intruder from another world who had come to overthrow their king or queen. As soon as those words left his mouth, everyone started booing and jeering at me angrily. The soldiers grabbed hold of me then and dragged me away towards a set of large double doors at the far end of the room. The doors opened into a grand throne room, and seated on the throne was the most beautiful woman I had ever seen. She had long flowing hair and piercing blue eyes, and she was wearing a dress made of shimmering silk. Next to her stood a man who I assumed was her husband, the king. He wasn't as handsome as she was, but he still looked regal in his robes of state. "Who are you?" the queen asked me in a cold voice. "And what do you want?" I took a deep breath before answering her. "My name is Alice," I said slowly. "And I've come from another world to warn you about an impending triumph." "What are you talking about?" the king demanded. "I'm sorry," I said, shaking my head. "But I don't have time to explain everything right now. Suffice it to say that there is a great triumph coming your way, and you need to be prepared for it." The queen and king exchanged a worried look, and then the latter spoke again. "Very well," he said with a sigh. "We will hear what you have to say. But first, you must pass our test." Just like the guards outside, the king proceeded to ask me a series of riddles, and once again, I managed to answer them all correctly. After I had passed the test, the queen beckoned me closer and asked me to tell her more about this impending triumph. So I did. I told her everything I knew about the triumph of my fungus, and so I reached dream state. I was sleeping